The wine glasses clinked like fragile nerves against the backdrop of a string quartet playing in perfect, soulless harmony from the outside. It was a picture-perfect evening, white orchids cascaded from crystal vases. A $10,000 cake waited to be cut, and guests adorned in designer labels exchanged practice pleasantries. But Rebecca Morgan was drowning in silk and silence. She stood beside her fiancé, William Caldwell III, whose smile was carved from polished ambition rather than joy. His hand rested on the small of her back, too firm, too possessive, as he guided her through the crowd of Manhattan's elite gathered in the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons. Rebecca nodded mechanically at well-wishers, her fingers trembling against the flute of champagne she barely sipped. "Only 2 more hours," William whispered, his breath warm against her ear, but his words cold with impatience. "Then we can escape all this formality." Rebecca forced a smile. At 35, she had mastered the art of appearing composed even when her insides were in turmoil. The diamond on her finger caught the light, sending fractured rainbows across her cream-colored gown. It was a perfect 6-carat stone, chosen not for her taste, but for its ability to make a statement. Like everything else about this engagement, it was meticulously calculated. Her phone vibrated in the hidden pocket of her gown. Rebecca excused herself with practiced grace, slipping away to a quiet corner near the terrace doors. The message was from Alexandra, a junior attorney she had mentored years ago before the woman left for a smaller firm. Prenup redline updated. Hidden clause, all holdings transfer to Caldwell Global upon marriage dissolution. He's covering his tracks fast. Thought you should know. For one perfect, breaking second. The room stilled. Rebecca blinked once, twice. The chandeliers above blurred as her vision swam. Everything she had built over 15 years, Morgan Enterprises, the real estate development company she had grown from nothing into a Fortune 500 contender, would be William's for the taking. He had never loved her. He had only wanted to acquire her. William appeared at her side, still smiling for the cameras that occasionally flashed in their direction. "Everything all right. Darling, the senator's asking for us." "I need air," Rebecca whispered, already turning toward the terrace doors. "Where are you going?" he asked under his breath, fingers tightening around her wrist. "We have guests." She pulled away. "Just 5 minutes." She didn't wait for his response, didn't think beyond the need to escape. Her heels clicked across marble, past curious glances and murmured questions, through the ornate doors and out onto the terrace. The December air slapped against her bare shoulders, but Rebecca barely registered the cold. Her mind raced through the implications of Alexandra's message, through every moment with William that suddenly made perfect sense. The acquisitions he had suggested, the clients he had introduced, the strategic moves he had proposed for her company. They hadn't been collaboration between equals. They had been careful manipulations to position her company for his eventual takeover. Rebecca's breath came in sharp, painful gasps. Below, 50 floors down, Manhattan glittered with indifferent beauty, blanketed in the season's first snow. Her engagement party continued inside, a fantasy of romance and success that masked a calculated business merger. She couldn't go back in there, in a split-second decision that would alter the course of her life. Rebecca Morgan stepped back from the terrace railing, slipped off her heels, and walked purposefully toward the service elevator. No coat, no purse, no phone. She left it on the terrace, a digital breadcrumb William would surely find. She rode down with a bewildered kitchen worker who kept stealing glances at her evening gown, in the service alley behind the hotel. Rebecca emerged into the falling snow, the cold concrete biting at her stockinged feet. She slipped her shoes back on and walked, away from the Four Seasons, away from William Caldwell III, away from the life she had built that now felt like an elaborate cage. She walked for blocks, the cold seeping through the thin silk of her gown, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Time blurred as snow collected on her shoulders and in her dark hair, when one heel snapped beneath her, sending her sprawling onto the sidewalk. Rebecca didn't cry. She laughed, a broken, desperate sound that startled a passing couple who hurried away from the disheveled woman in the torn evening gown. Rebecca limped to a nearby bench, her palms scraped raw, a tear in her dress exposing her thigh to the bitter cold. She sat in the gathering snow, watching taxis splash through slush, their yellow a smear of warmth against the darkening night. No one recognized the woman who had once graced the cover of Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40 issue. Tonight, she was just another tragedy in a city accustomed to looking away. The practical part of her brain, the CEO, the strategist, finally kicked in. She needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere William wouldn't think to look. Not a hotel where cameras might capture her arrival. Not a friend's place. William knew all her friends, had cultivated relationships with them as carefully as he had with her. Rebecca managed to make her way to Port Authority, where she used the diamond earrings William had given her for Christmas to buy a bus ticket to Boston from a wide-eyed pawn shop owner near the station. She chose Boston on impulse. She had no connections there. No reason for William to search for her in that city. The overnight bus was nearly empty. Rebecca huddled in a seat at the back, wrapped in the thin blanket a kind-eyed older woman had offered her, as the city lights faded behind them, replaced by the darkness of suburban New Jersey and then Connecticut. Rebecca closed her eyes, not to sleep but to breathe. For the first time in years, she had no plan, no strategy, no carefully constructed path forward. It was terrifying. It was freeing. She arrived in Boston before dawn, stepping off the bus into another world. The snow had followed her north, falling heavier here, blanketing the streets in pristine white. Rebecca wandered through the awakening city, trying to ignore the stares her evening attire attracted. She found a thrift store just opening and traded her remaining jewelry, a tennis bracelet worth more than most cars, for jeans, a sweater, boots, and a coat that smelled faintly of mothballs but blissfully of anonymity. The store owner, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, didn't ask questions, just offered her the bathroom to change and a cup of coffee afterward. "Whatever you're running from, honey," she said as Rebecca prepared to leave. "I hope you find what you're running to." Rebecca nodded, words failing her. She spent the day moving through Boston like a ghost, riding subway lines to their ends, watching families in parks, sitting in coffee shops until the baristas began to give her concerned looks. As evening fell and the temperature dropped further, she realized she needed shelter for the night, with the remaining cash from her jewelry exchange. Rebecca found herself on a bus headed toward a suburb the driver had recommended as quiet, safe, and nobody asked too many questions. The snow was coming down harder now, the kind of snow that muffled sound and logic alike. Streets became increasingly residential, modest homes with holiday lights twinkling through the white curtain of winter. Rebecca got off at a random stop, her body aching with exhaustion, her mind finally quiet after the chaos of the past 24 hours. She wandered down a street where porch lights burned warm against the gathering darkness, where homes still had paint that chipped and fences that leaned with character rather than neglect. She stopped in front of a small two-story house with a flickering porch light and a child's drawing taped crookedly in the front window. A colorful rendition of what might have been a unicorn or possibly a very ambitious cat. There was no reason for her to choose this house, except that something about it didn't feel cold. Rebecca climbed the short steps and raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. It was nearly 2 a.m. according to the watch she still wore. William's first gift to her. Ironically, the least expensive, but the only one chosen with actual thought. What kind of person knocked on a stranger's door at this hour? A desperate one. She knocked once, twice, 3 times, then sagged against the doorframe, her body shivering violently now, lips numb, arms wrapped around herself. The scrapes on her palms throbbed. But that wasn't what hurt. The door opened, spilling warm light onto the porch. A man stood in the doorway, late 30s, broad-shouldered but not imposing, with the kind of face that carried weariness and kindness in equal measure. His brown hair was rumpled, jaw stubbled, and he blinked at her like he hadn't yet decided if she was real or a ghost conjured from the storm. "I'm sorry," Rebecca managed, her voice cracking from disuse and cold. "I didn't know where else to go." He looked past her, down the street, then back at her face. His eyes, Hazel, she noticed, with flecks of gold near the pupils, narrowed with concern rather than suspicion. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low and surprisingly gentle. She gestured vaguely toward her scraped arm. "Not really. Just lost." Her voice caught. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just—" She couldn't finish the thought, couldn't explain what had drawn her to this particular door. Instead, what came out surprised even her. "You feel familiar. I don't know why." His expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his features. He hesitated only a moment longer before stepping outside, instinctively wrapping an arm around her shoulders to guide her in. "Let's get you warm," he said simply. Inside, the warmth wrapped around her like a quilt too long stored, but suddenly remembered. The house was modest but lived in a small living room with a well-worn couch, a coffee table scattered with crayon drawings and building blocks, a bookshelf overflowing with paperbacks and children's stories. A soft nightlight glowed from the hallway, and somewhere in the house, she could hear the gentle hum of a heating system fighting against the bitter cold outside. He gently sat her on the couch and grabbed a blanket from the armrest, draping it around her shoulders with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to caring for others. "I'll get you some tea. Don't go passing out on me." "Okay." There was a hint of a smile in his voice, an attempt to ease the strangeness of the situation. Rebecca managed a faint nod, her body gradually registering the blessed warmth of the house. The man disappeared into what she presumed was the kitchen, and she let her eyes wander the room. There were framed photographs on the walls, the man and a little girl with curly brown hair in his eyes, the two of them at a beach, at what looked like a school play, building a snowman, no sign of a woman, no evidence of a partner or co-parent. He returned with tea and a first aid kit, kneeling to clean the scrapes on her palms and arm with surprising gentleness. "I'm Michael," he said, focusing on his task rather than her face, giving her the dignity of not having to meet his eyes. "Michael Bennett. You got a name?" She hesitated. The weight of Rebecca Morgan, CEO, socialite, fiancé on the run, suddenly too heavy to carry. "Becca," she offered. Just Becca, the nickname her grandmother had used before the world had decided she needed to be Rebecca to be taken seriously. He didn't push for a last name, just nodded and continued tending to her scrapes. "You're lucky it was my house," he said after a moment. Finally looking up, his eyes were kind but guarded. "Anyone else might have called the cops. I wouldn't blame them." He stood, putting away the first aid supplies. "People don't just knock on a stranger's door at 2 a.m., wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly mortgage unless something really bad happened." Rebecca sipped her tea. It scalded, but she needed the heat, needed the sharp reminder that she was here, now, in this moment and not in the nightmare she'd fled. "Something did," she admitted quietly. Michael sat in an armchair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Well, you're safe now, but just so you know," he added with a seriousness that didn't quite mask his concern, "I've got a 6-year-old asleep upstairs. If you're dangerous, I'll throw you back into the snow, storm or no storm." A smile tugged at Rebecca's lips, the first real one in months. "I'm not dangerous," she said softly. "Just tired of pretending." Michael studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if she'd passed some unspoken test. "We all are, eventually." The wind howled outside, rattling windows and whisking snow against the glass. Inside, silence settled like trust, tentative, fragile, and just beginning. "The couch pulls out into a bed," Michael said, standing. "I'll get you some sheets and a proper pillow. Bathroom's down the hall if you need it." He hesitated, then added, "Tomorrow will bring questions, but tonight, all that matters is you're not in the cold anymore." As he disappeared upstairs, Rebecca sank deeper into the couch, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. She had run from her life with nothing but the clothes on her back. William would be looking for her, not out of love or concern, but because she had made him look foolish, had disrupted his carefully laid plans. Her company would be in chaos. Her friends would be worried, but for the first time in her life, Rebecca Morgan felt like she hadn't walked into a house. She'd found a possibility. Sleep claimed her quickly, deep and dreamless. The kind of sleep that comes after crisis when the body demands rest, even if the mind isn't ready. She woke to the scent of coffee and the creak of an old house coming alive. The blanket around her shoulders was thick and soft, worn from use but clean. Sunlight filtered through the living room blinds in narrow golden lines, painting stripes across the hardwood floor. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pan sizzled, and a child's voice lilted in quiet conversation. For a moment, Rebecca didn't remember where she was. Then it hit her, hard and quiet at once. The wedding, the message, the snow, the knock. Her fingers instinctively reached for the edge of the couch, grounding her in the unfamiliar room that had somehow become her sanctuary for the night. Footsteps approached, and she sat up quickly, smoothing her tangled hair with self-conscious fingers. Michael appeared in the doorway, holding a spatula and looking half amused, half wary. "You're awake," he said, voice carrying the slight roughness of morning. "Didn't think you'd still be here." Rebecca opened her mouth, then paused, uncertainty flooding her. Where exactly would she have gone? "I almost wasn't," she admitted, "but I didn't want to leave without saying thank you." He nodded once, a short, efficient gesture, and disappeared back into the kitchen. Rebecca followed, drawn by the smell of coffee and the normalcy of a morning routine that felt alien after the chaos of the previous day. The kitchen was modest but warm, wooden cabinets painted a soft blue, mismatched mugs hanging from hooks, a refrigerator covered in finger-painted art and alphabet magnets. A little girl with a riot of brown curls sat at the table, swinging her legs and drawing with a purple crayon. She looked up at Rebecca's entrance and blinked with open, unabashed curiosity. "This is Emma," Michael said, flipping what looked like French toast on the stove. "She's 6. He turned to his daughter. "Emma, this is Ms. Becca. She stayed over last night." Rebecca crouched down to the girl's level. Something she'd learned years ago made children feel respected rather than towered over. "Hi, Emma. That's a beautiful drawing. Is that a dragon?" "It's a flying lion," Emma corrected seriously, then broke into a gap-toothed smile. "But it breathes ice, not fire, 'cause it's winter." Rebecca laughed, a sound that surprised even her. "Of course, that makes perfect sense." Emma studied her with the unfiltered intensity only children can manage. "You're really pretty," she declared. "Are you a princess?" Michael coughed from the stove. "She's just a guest." "Honey." "Actually," Rebecca said, winking at Emma, "I'm in disguise. Princesses need vacations too." Emma's eyes widened, and Michael shot Rebecca a look that was part amusement, part warning. "Great. Now she'll tell everyone at school she hosted royalty." Rebecca straightened, suddenly embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's fine," he interrupted, sliding a plate of French toast onto the table. "Emma knows the difference between pretend and real. Don't you?" Emma nodded solemnly, but the glance she gave Rebecca was conspiratorial. "I won't tell anyone you're here," she whispered loudly. "It can be our secret mission." Michael rolled his eyes, but his expression was fond. "Eat your breakfast, Agent Emma. You've got school in 30 minutes. He poured a cup of coffee and handed it to Rebecca without asking if she wanted one. "Milk's in the fridge if you need it. Sugar's on the counter." The domesticity of the moment was disarming. Rebecca took the coffee with a murmured thanks and leaned against the counter, watching as Michael moved efficiently around the kitchen, packing a lunchbox, checking a permission slip, reminding Emma to brush her teeth, with actual toothpaste this time, not just water. It was so different from her mornings in the Manhattan penthouse. No personal chef preparing a precisely calibrated nutrition plan. No assistant running through the day's schedule. No William checking stock prices before saying good morning. Just a father and daughter navigating a Tuesday with practiced familiarity. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Michael asked as he helped Emma into a bright red coat. "I'm taking her to school. Then I've got work, but I can drop you wherever you need to go." The unspoken question hung in the air, Where exactly did she need to go? Rebecca didn't have an answer. I don't have anywhere specific, she admitted. Could I stay here a bit longer, just until I figure some things out? I'll be gone by the time you get back from work. Michael studied her, and Rebecca could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, weighing the risk of leaving a stranger in his home against what his instincts were telling him. I've got a job at a client's house this morning, but I should be back by noon, he finally said. You can stay until then. Just, he glanced around his modest home. Don't steal anything. Not that there's much worth taking. Rebecca nodded, relieved. I promise your vintage mug collection is safe with me. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The valuable ones are hidden in a vault, he deadpanned. Come on, Em. Shoes on. Emma hurried to obey, but not before wrapping her arms around Rebecca's waist in a surprise hug. Bye, Princess Becca. I'll bring you a treasure from school. Then they were gone, in a flurry of backpack adjustments and last-minute reminders, leaving Rebecca alone in a stranger's kitchen, holding a cooling cup of coffee and wondering what exactly she was doing. The house felt different without them, quieter, but not in an unpleasant way. Rebecca wandered from room to room, not snooping so much as trying to understand the man who had opened his door to her. The living room held bookshelves filled with an eclectic mix of architectural journals, mystery novels, children's books, photography collections. A guitar stood in one corner, sheet music scattered nearby. Upstairs, she peeked into Emma's room, a cheerful chaos of stuffed animals, books, and art supplies. The walls were covered in her drawings, and a small desk by the window held a half-completed diorama of what appeared to be a space station made from toilet paper rolls and glitter. Michael's room was neater but still lived in. A king-sized bed with navy blue sheets, a dresser with framed photographs, a nightstand stacked with books. One photo caught her eye. Michael in a suit, standing in front of a sleek glass building, his arm around a petite woman with Emma's curls and a bright smile. They looked happy, professional, ambitious. Rebecca stepped back, feeling suddenly like an intruder. This wasn't the Michael who had opened the door to her last night. That Michael wore worn jeans and flannel, fixed things with his hands, made French toast for his daughter. What had happened to the man in the photograph back downstairs? She found herself drawn to a small home office tucked off the kitchen. Architectural drawings were pinned to a corkboard. Beautiful, innovative designs for homes and commercial spaces. Awards and certificates hung on the wall. Gathering Dust, Michael Bennett. Architectural Excellence Award, Bennett Designs. Urban Innovation Prize, on the desk. A framed article from Architectural Digest featured a younger Michael standing in front of a striking modern building. The headline read, Rising Star, Michael Bennett Reshapes Boston's Skyline. Beside it lay a half-completed application form, Emma Bennett. Scholarship application, Brookside Academy for Gifted Children. Rebecca sat at the desk, reading through the application. Michael had filled out the basic information but had left the essay portions blank. One prompt asked parents to describe their child's unique qualities and potential contributions to the academy. Another requested information about financial need and family circumstances, without fully understanding why. Rebecca picked up a pen. She had written countless business proposals, grant applications, and persuasive documents. This was different, but the principles were the same. Highlight strengths, address potential concerns, tell a compelling story. She didn't finish the essays, that wasn't her place, but she organized the structure, jotted down bullet points of strengths based on what she'd observed in Emma, and made notes about formatting that would make the application stand out. The morning passed quickly after that. Rebecca made the bed on the pull-out couch, washed her mug, and straightened the living room. She found a notepad in the kitchen and wrote a simple message, Michael. Thank you for your kindness to a stranger. I've organized some thoughts for Emma's scholarship application on your desk. She's an extraordinary child who deserves every opportunity. I've gone to figure out my next steps, but please know your generosity won't be forgotten. Becca. She placed it on the counter where he would see it, gathered her few belongings, and prepared to leave. But as she opened the front door, a blast of icy wind and swirling snow pushed her back inside. The storm had intensified while she'd been lost in thought, transforming the quiet suburban street into a white void. Rebecca closed the door, shivering. Leaving now would be foolish, possibly dangerous. She would have to wait for Michael to return, explain the situation, and hope he would understand. She was still standing in the entryway, uncertain, when headlights swept across the front window, moments later. The door opened and Michael stepped in, shaking snow from his coat. "You're still here," he said, but it wasn't an accusation, more an observation tinged with relief. "The storm," Rebecca explained, gesturing toward the window. "I was about to leave when it got worse. I'm sorry. I can go if—" "It's a blizzard out there," Michael interrupted, hanging his coat on a hook by the door. "They've closed the schools. I had to pick Emma up early." As if on cue, Emma bounded in behind him, her face flushed with cold and excitement. "Princess Becca, you're still here," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Rebecca's waist. "Did you make the storm happen so we could have a snow day together?" Michael rolled his eyes. "Emma, what did we say about inside voices? That they're boring but necessary," Emma recited, then looked up at Rebecca with wide eyes. "Dad says we're snowed in and you'll have to stay. We're going to make hot chocolate and build a blanket fort and read stories. Do you know any princess stories, real ones? Not the kind in books?" Rebecca glanced at Michael, who shrugged with a half smile. "The roads are pretty bad," he admitted. "The news says the storm will last through tomorrow. You're welcome to stay, if you need to." There it was again, that strange familiarity, that sense that she had somehow knocked on exactly the right door in exactly the right moment. Rebecca should have felt trapped, anxious about extending her stay with these strangers. Instead, she felt something unfamiliar relief. "If you're sure it's not an imposition," she said carefully. "Dad says nothing that happens during a blizzard counts as an imposition," Emma announced, already tugging off her snow boots. "It's a weather emergency rule." Michael laughed, a warm sound that seemed to fill the small entryway. "I don't recall saying exactly that, but the spirit is correct." He met Rebecca's eyes. "You can stay, at least until the road's clear." And as Emma chattered about her snow day plans, Rebecca felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the tight knot that had formed in her chest the moment she'd read Alexandra's message. For the first time in years, she didn't have to be Rebecca Morgan, CEO of Morgan Enterprises, fiancée of William Caldwell III, woman who had everything under control. Here, in this modest house with the flickering porch light, she could just be Becca, a woman finding her way through an unexpected storm. The day unfolded with a dreamlike quality, so removed from Rebecca's normal life that it felt like stepping into someone else's existence. Emma insisted on building an elaborate blanket fort in the living room, directing operations with the seriousness of a five-star general. Michael followed her instructions with good-natured patience, securing sheets to chair backs and weighing down corners with books. Rebecca found herself assigned to cushion arrangement and snack preparation, tasks she tackled with a surprising enthusiasm. When was the last time she'd done something so frivolous, so purely for the joy of it? "No, Dad, the blue blanket goes on top because it's the sky," Emma corrected, hands on her hips. "Princess Becca, tell him—" "The structural engineer in me wants to argue," Michael said with a wink to Rebecca. "But I've learned to defer to the creative director." "Smart man," Rebecca replied, crawling into the fort with a bowl of popcorn. "The sky is definitely blue." They spent the afternoon huddled in their fabric castle, reading stories, playing board games that Emma insisted on teaching Rebecca. "You don't know Candyland were you raised by wolves?" And watching the snow pile higher outside the windows. Michael made hot chocolate with real chocolate and whipped cream, and Emma convinced him to add extra marshmallows because it's a special occasion. As evening approached, Michael excused himself to make dinner, leaving Rebecca and Emma in the fort with a stack of books. Emma snuggled against Rebecca's side as if they'd known each other forever, pointing out her favorite illustrations and occasionally asking questions that revealed she hadn't forgotten Rebecca's princess disguise. "Do you have a castle?" she whispered. Rebecca thought of her penthouse with its sterile white furniture and panoramic views. I have a home high above the city, she answered truthfully. But it doesn't feel as cozy as this. Emma nodded sagely. That's because you need a blanket fort and maybe a dragon or a flying lion. You're absolutely right, Rebecca agreed. Every home needs those things. When Michael called them for dinner, Emma insisted Rebecca sit in the special chair, which, as far as Rebecca could tell, was identical to the others but had been deemed superior through some child logic she couldn't discern. Dinner was simple: spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, and a salad. But it tasted better than any Michelin-starred meal Rebecca had experienced in recent memory. The conversation flowed easily, Emma dominating with tales from school and elaborate descriptions of her imaginary worlds. Rebecca found herself relaxing, laughing genuinely at Emma's antics and exchanging amused glances with Michael across the table. There was an ease to their interactions that surprised her. No politics to navigate, no hidden agendas to decipher, no need to maintain the careful facade she'd constructed over years in the corporate world. After Emma had been tucked into bed, a process that required 3 stories, 2 songs, and a solemn promise from Rebecca to guard against night trolls, Michael returned to the living room with 2 glasses of wine. Found this in the back of the pantry, he said, offering her a glass. Nothing fancy, but it seemed like a night that called for something stronger than tea. Rebecca accepted the glass gratefully. Thank you, not just for this, but for, she gestured vaguely, encompassing the house, the day, the unexpected hospitality. Michael settled into the armchair across from her, the remains of the blanket fort still draped around them like a cloth cave. You don't have to keep thanking me. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, Rebecca said quietly. They wouldn't. Most people would have called the police, or at minimum, asked far more questions than you have. Michael studied her over the rim of his glass. I figure you'll share what you want to share when you're ready, or you won't. And that's okay too. He paused. Though I admit I'm curious about what exactly drove you to my door at 2 a.m. in the middle of a snowstorm. Rebecca looked down at her wine, watching the light play through the deep red liquid. How much could she tell him without revealing everything, without dragging him into the mess she'd left behind? I was engaged, she began, deciding that partial truths were better than outright lies. The wedding was set for spring, very elaborate, very public. Sounds stressful, Michael commented neutrally. Rebecca laughed. A short, brittle sound. That's one word for it. Yesterday was our engagement party. Everything was perfect, at least on the surface. But I discovered my fiancé had been less than honest about his intentions. She took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. He had plans for my career that I wasn't aware of. Plans that would have essentially erased everything I've worked for. Michael nodded slowly. So you left. I ran, Rebecca corrected. No phone, no money, no plan, just an overwhelming need to get away. She looked up at him. I know how crazy that sounds. Not crazy, Michael said, surprising her. Brave. Rebecca blinked. Brave, I abandoned everything. Disappeared without a word to anyone. That's not brave. It's choosing yourself over comfort, Michael interrupted gently. It's recognizing a bad situation and having the courage to walk away. Even without a safety net. Not many people do that. His words settled over her like a blanket, warm and unexpectedly comforting, for the first time since she'd fled the 4 seasons. Rebecca wondered if perhaps she hadn't failed, but had instead done something necessary. Something right. What about you? She asked, eager to shift the focus. Emma mentioned her mom isn't around. A shadow crossed Michael's face. Sarah passed away when Emma was 2. Heart condition we didn't know about until it was too late. I'm so sorry, Rebecca said softly, genuinely moved by the quiet grief still evident in his voice. It was 4 years ago, Michael said. We've adjusted, not moved on, exactly, but found a new normal. He glanced toward the stairs. Emma doesn't really remember her, which is both a blessing and a tragedy, She knows Sarah through stories and photos, but not through memory. Rebecca nodded, thinking of the photographs she'd seen throughout the house. The woman with the bright smile and Emma's curls. You've done an amazing job with her. She's incredible. Michael's expression softened. She is. Isn't she smart as a whip? Creative. Fearless. Sometimes I look at her and wonder how something so perfect came from me. I saw the scholarship application, Rebecca admitted, for Brookside Academy. Ah, that. Michael ran a hand through his hair. It's a long shot. The school is, well, it's not exactly in our budget. But Emma's teacher suggested we apply. Says she's showing signs of being gifted, especially in science and art. You should definitely apply, Rebecca encouraged. I hope you don't mind, but I jotted down some notes. The application structure needed a bit of work. Michael raised an eyebrow. I saw very professional notes. Becca, almost like you've done this kind of thing before. There was a question in his tone, but not an accusatory one. Rebecca chose her words carefully. I work in business, grant writing, proposals. They're part of the job. Must be quite the business, Michael remarked. Those weren't the hands of someone who makes coffee runs and answers phones. Rebecca tensed slightly. Was he putting the pieces together? Had he recognized her after all? I've worked hard to get where I am, she said, which was true enough. Michael seemed to sense her discomfort and backed off. Well, I appreciate the help with the application. I'm not great at selling myself or Emma. Feels too much like bragging. It's not bragging if it's true, Rebecca pointed out. And from what I've seen, Emma deserves every opportunity. They lapsed into comfortable silence, the wind howling outside the only reminder of the storm that had thrown them together. Rebecca found herself studying Michael more closely, the way his hands cradled the wineglass, the laugh lines around his eyes, the quiet confidence he exuded without arrogance. He was nothing like William, nothing like the men she typically encountered in her corporate world. There was a genuineness to him that was both disarming and attractive. I saw the architectural awards in your office, she said eventually. You designed buildings. Michael nodded, a mixture of pride and something like regret crossing his features. That was the plan. Bennett Designs, my own firm, we were doing well, had some high-profile projects in Boston, even one in Chicago. What happened? Sarah died, he said simply. And suddenly I had a 2-year-old who needed me more than the world needed another glass tower. The firm required travel, late nights, constant networking. I couldn't do that and be the father Emma needed. So you gave it up, Rebecca said softly, understanding dawning. The man in the suit in the photograph, the rising star, he had walked away from all of it. I pivoted, Michael corrected. Started Bennett Renovations instead. Smaller scale, local clients, flexible hours. I still get to design, just powder rooms and kitchen islands rather than skyscrapers. He smiled, but there was a wistfulness to it. Not quite what I imagined when I was in architecture school, but it works for us. Rebecca thought about her own career, the sacrifices she'd made, the relationships she'd neglected, all in service to building Morgan Enterprises. Would she have made the same choice Michael had? Would she have been able to set aside ambition for love? You're a good father, she said, the words coming from somewhere deep and genuine. Michael looked slightly embarrassed. I try. Some days are better than others. All days are better than having a parent who's physically present but emotionally absent, Rebecca said, thinking of her own childhood in her father's cold, achievement-oriented household. Michael studied her, as if seeing something new. Sounds like you speak from experience. Rebecca didn't answer directly. The storm is supposed to let up tomorrow. Michael accepted the change of subject gracefully. That's what they're saying. Roads should be clear by afternoon. He hesitated. You're welcome to stay until then. After that, do you have a plan? The question hung between them, heavier than it should have been for two virtual strangers. Did she have a plan? Should she return to New York, confront William, reclaim her company and her life? Or was this the universe offering her a chance at something different, something new? I'm working on it, She finally said, "One day at a time." Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes that's all we can do." He stood, gathering their empty glasses. "The pull-out couch is yours for as long as you need it. And Becca," he paused, meeting her gaze, "whatever you're running from, whatever you're running to, you've got this. I can tell." His simple faith in her, a woman he barely knew, touched something in Rebecca that had been dormant for too long. As he disappeared into the kitchen, she sat in the remains of the blanket fort, surrounded by the evidence of a day spent in genuine connection rather than strategic networking, for the first time since she'd left the Four Seasons. Rebecca allowed herself to consider that maybe, just maybe, running away hadn't been an ending, but a beginning. The storm continued through the night, snow piling against windows and wind moaning through the eaves. Rebecca slept deeply, cocooned in borrowed blankets and the strange peace that had settled over her. She woke to the sound of Emma's laughter and the smell of pancakes wafting from the kitchen. For a moment, lying in the quiet morning light, Rebecca could almost pretend this was her life, this modest house with its creaking floors and warm kitchen. The child's laughter. The man who made pancakes on snowy mornings. It was a dangerous thought, one that tugged at something long buried beneath ambition and self-sufficiency. She pushed it aside and rose to face the day. Whatever it might bring, in the kitchen, Emma was attempting to create a pancake shaped like a flying lion. With Michael's patient assistance, they both looked up at Rebecca's entrance, Emma with delight and Michael with a smile that reached his eyes. "Princess Becca, Dad says the snow is too deep for school again today. We're building a snowman after breakfast. You have to help." Rebecca found herself agreeing without hesitation, as if building snowmen was something she did regularly, rather than a childhood activity she'd missed out on with her strict, achievement-focused upbringing. Breakfast was chaos in the best possible way. Maple syrup spilled, pancake shapes debated, Emma's stories punctuated by giggles and dramatic gestures. Rebecca found herself laughing more than she had in years. The weight of Morgan Enterprises and William Caldwell III temporarily lifted from her shoulders. After breakfast, they bundled up in layers of borrowed clothing, Michael's spare gloves engulfing Rebecca's hands, a too large hat sliding over her eyes, one of Emma's scarves wrapped around her neck. Outside, the world was transformed into a winter wonderland, the storm having left nearly 2 feet of pristine snow in its wake. Emma plunged in immediately, falling backward to make snow angels and throwing powdery handfuls into the air. Michael began rolling the base for a snowman, and Rebecca joined him, the two of them working in companionable silence while Emma darted around them like an excited puppy. "You're pretty good at this for a princess," Michael commented as they hefted the middle section onto the base. Rebecca smiled, her cheeks flushed with cold and exertion. "I contain multitudes." Clearly, his gaze lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary, something unreadable in his expression. They finished the snowman with great ceremony, Emma insisting on using a carrot for the nose. It's traditional, Dad and Michael's scarf for warmth. Rebecca contributed buttons from an old coat for the eyes and mouth, arranging them into a slightly crooked smile. "He needs a crown," Emma declared, "like Princess Becca's." "I don't actually have a crown, Emma," Rebecca reminded her gently. "That's because you're undercover," Emma said with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old. "But all princesses have crowns, even secret ones." Michael disappeared into the garage and returned with a ring of twisted metal, possibly from an old lampshade, which Emma deemed perfect after they wrapped it in silver foil from the kitchen. "Their snowman complete. Snow King," Emma corrected. They retreated inside, soaked and chilled but glowing with the simple pleasure of play. Michael made hot chocolate while Rebecca helped Emma out of her wet clothes and into dry ones, the domestic act feeling strange but right beneath her hands, as they sat around the kitchen table, warming their hands on steaming mugs. Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then frowned slightly. "Roads are clear," he said, looking up at Rebecca. "Emergency services have everything plowed and salted ahead of schedule." The news, which should have been welcome, landed like a stone in Rebecca's stomach. Clear roads meant decisions. Clear roads meant the bubble of these snow days would burst. Reality rushing back in. "Oh," she managed, wrapping her hands tighter around her mug. "That's good." Emma looked between them, confusion creasing her small forehead. "Does that mean Princess Becca has to go back to her castle?" Michael's eyes met Rebecca's over Emma's head, a question in them that Rebecca wasn't sure how to answer. She began, then stopped, uncertain. "Becca probably has people looking for her," Michael explained to Emma, his gaze still on Rebecca. "Important princess business to take care of." Emma's face fell. "But she just got here and we haven't even shown her the park, or my school, or Marjorie's cookies at the community center." Rebecca felt something crack inside her chest, not painfully, but like ice breaking on a river in spring. Something long frozen beginning to move again. "I don't have to leave right away," she heard herself saying. Maybe I could stay another day if that's all right with your dad." The hope that blazed across Emma's face was almost painful to witness. She turned to Michael with pleading eyes. "Please, Dad, just one more day." Michael hesitated, and Rebecca could see the conflict in his expression. He was a father first, protective of his daughter's heart. Allowing Rebecca to stay longer meant risking Emma becoming attached to someone who would inevitably leave. "You're welcome to stay," he said carefully. "But Emma, remember that Becca has her own life to get back to. This is just a vacation for her." Emma nodded solemnly, but her excitement couldn't be contained for long. She launched into plans for what they would do with their extra day together, barely pausing for breath between ideas. As Emma chattered, Michael caught Rebecca's eye. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "No one waiting for you to check in." Rebecca thought about William, about her assistant Caroline who was probably frantic, about the board members who would be demanding explanations. They were waiting, certainly, but not in the way Michael meant. "I'm sure," she said with more confidence than she felt. "One more day won't change anything." But even as she said it, Rebecca wondered if that was true. Something was already changing, inside her, around her, between her and this small family who had taken her in without question. One more day turned into 2, then 3, as Rebecca found increasingly tenuous excuses to delay her departure. The storm had closed the bus station. She needed to organize her thoughts before making any decisions. She wanted to help Michael finish Emma's scholarship application. Michael didn't push, though she occasionally caught him watching her with a thoughtful expression, as if trying to solve a puzzle whose pieces didn't quite fit together. On the 4th morning, as Rebecca helped Emma get ready for her now reopened school, she realized with a start that she had fallen into a routine. She knew which drawer held Emma's socks, knew that the little girl preferred her hair braided on school days but loose on weekends, knew that Michael set the coffee maker the night before so it would be ready when they woke. These small, intimate details of their lives had become familiar to her, as had the sound of Michael's laugh and the way Emma hummed to herself while drawing. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. After dropping Emma at school, Michael surprised Rebecca by taking her to the community center, where he volunteered on Thursday mornings. "Thought you might like to see where the magic happens," he said as they pulled into the parking lot of a modest brick building with a hand-painted sign, Hope Haven Community Center. Inside, the center was warm and busy despite the early hour. A silver-haired woman with bright eyes and practical clothing spotted them immediately, making her way through the crowd with surprising speed. "Michael Bennett, you're late," she called, though her smile belied the scolding. "The sink in the kitchen is acting up again, and Gloria can't make the pancakes without—" She stopped short at the sight of Rebecca. "Well, hello there. Who's this Gloria? This is Becca," Michael said. "She's staying with us for a few days. Becca, this is Gloria Thompson, the heart and soul of Hope Haven." Gloria's eyes twinkled as she shook Rebecca's hand. "Any friend of Michael's is a friend of mine. Dear, though I must say, you're the first woman he's brought here in— Goodness, how long has it been?" "Michael." "Gloria," Michael warned, a flush creeping up his neck. 4 years at least, Gloria continued, undeterred. Not since Sarah. God rest her soul. Rebecca felt her own cheeks warm. Oh, it's not like that. I'm just... She's staying with us temporarily. Michael interjected. I'm helping her out during a transition period. Gloria's expression softened with understanding. Well, we're all about transitions here. That's what Hope Haven is for, helping folks find their feet when life knocks them sideways. She linked her arm through Rebecca's. Come on, dear. I'll show you around while Michael fixes that sink, and you can tell me what brought you to our little corner of the world. Rebecca allowed herself to be led through the center, listening as Gloria explained their various programs: meals for seniors, after-school activities for children, job training, ESL classes, a small shelter for women and children in crisis. The place hummed with purpose and warmth, people greeting each other by name and stopping to check in with genuine interest. Michael's been our handyman since before Emma was born, Gloria explained as they watched him kneeling by the kitchen sink, tools spread around him. But after Sarah passed, this place became more than that for him, a lifeline. I think, Rebecca nodded, watching as Michael joked with the elderly cook whose pancakes had been delayed by the plumbing issue. There was an ease to him here, a sense of belonging that spoke of deep roots. He gave up a lot, Gloria continued, her voice softer. That architecture firm of his was really taking off, had projects all over the East Coast, offers from bigger firms to buy him out for millions. But when Sarah died, she shook her head. He said Emma needed a father more than he needed success, walked away from all of it to be there for that little girl. The information shouldn't have surprised Rebecca. She'd seen the awards, heard Michael's abbreviated explanation, but hearing it laid out so plainly, the scale of his sacrifice quantified in millions in career advancement, hit her differently. He doesn't talk about it much, Rebecca said. Gloria patted her arm. No, he wouldn't. Not Michael's style to dwell on what might have been. He lives in the now. That one, she gave Rebecca a shrewd look. Rare quality, especially in folks who've had success. Most can't stop chasing the next big thing long enough to notice what they already have. The observation struck uncomfortably close to home. Hadn't that been Rebecca's life for the past decade? Always the next acquisition, the next deal, the next rung on the ladder of success. Now, Gloria said, changing the subject, what can we put you to work doing? We don't believe in spectators at Hope Haven. Rebecca spent the morning helping in the center's small office, organizing donation records and updating their outdated filing system. The work was mundane compared to running a multinational corporation, but there was something satisfying about the immediate, tangible results of her efforts. At lunch, she joined Michael in the main hall, where community members gathered for a meal prepared by volunteer cooks. She found herself seated between an elderly veteran who told animated stories about his grandchildren and a young mother working 2 jobs while studying for her GED. Their stories, offered freely, without agenda or expectation, affected Rebecca more deeply than she anticipated. These were lives so different from her own, challenges she had never faced, resilience she had rarely witnessed in her insulated world of corporate success and social climbing. You okay? Michael asked quietly as they cleared their plates afterward. You've gone quiet, Rebecca nodded, not trusting her voice immediately. Just thinking. She finally managed. These people, what they're dealing with, it puts things in perspective. Michael studied her. That's why I bring Emma here regularly. I want her to understand that life isn't just about what you have or achieve. It's about how you show up for others, how you build community. My father would have called that sentimental nonsense, Rebecca said before she could stop herself. Michael raised an eyebrow. And what do you call it? She looked around the hall, at Gloria directing volunteers with cheerful efficiency, at the veteran now helping the young mother's toddler with a stubborn juice box, at the table of teenagers laughing over a card game. I think I call it real, she said softly. More real than most of what I've been chasing. Something shifted in Michael's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He opened his mouth to respond but was interrupted by Gloria calling his name, waving him over to help with a collapsed shelf in the supply room. "Duty calls," he said with a rueful smile. "But I want to come back to this conversation," as he walked away. Rebecca realized she wanted that too, wanted to continue this unexpected dialogue, this gentle questioning of values she had long taken for granted. They worked at the center until early afternoon. When it was time to pick up Emma from school, the little girl bounded into the car with her usual exuberance. Backpack spilling papers and a construction paper creation, she thrust proudly toward Rebecca. "I made this for you," she announced. "It's us." Rebecca examined the drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun. One small figure with wild brown curls, one taller figure with what appeared to be a hammer or wrench, and one figure wearing what was unmistakably a crown. "See?" Emma pointed. "That's me. And that's Dad. And that's you with your princess crown. And that's our house." "Itum." She indicated a square shape behind them with a crooked chimney and what might have been a flying lion perched on the roof. "It's beautiful." "Emma," Rebecca said, her throat unexpectedly tight. "Thank you. Mrs. Jackson said to draw our family," Emma explained, referring to her teacher. "So I did." Rebecca caught Michael's gaze in the rearview mirror, concern flashing across his features. They hadn't discussed how to handle Emma's growing attachment, how to prepare her for Rebecca's inevitable departure, because it was inevitable. Wasn't it Rebecca couldn't stay in this borrowed life forever, playing house with a man she barely knew, and his impressionable daughter? She had responsibilities, a company that depended on her, a life she had built through years of sacrifice and hard work. And yet, as Emma chattered about her day, and Michael drove them back to the house that had somehow become a sanctuary, Rebecca couldn't ignore the whisper of doubt growing louder in her mind. What if the life she had built wasn't the one she actually wanted that evening after Emma had gone to bed? Rebecca sat on the porch despite the lingering cold. The sky had cleared, stars emerging in the velvety darkness, their light crisp and distant. She heard the door open behind her, but didn't turn. Somehow knowing it was Michael, he settled beside her on the porch swing, offering a steaming mug. "Thought you might need this." Rebecca accepted the hot cider gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. "Thank you. For this. And for today. The community center is special." Michael nodded. "It is. Gloria's built something remarkable there." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the swing creaking gently beneath them. Rebecca could feel the weight of unasked questions between them, growing heavier with each passing day. "Emma's getting attached," Michael finally said, voicing the most pressing concern. Rebecca nodded, guilt twisting in her stomach. "I know, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "It's not your fault," Michael interrupted gently. "Emma, she misses having a mother figure. She gravitates toward any woman who shows her kindness." He sighed. "Usually they don't stick around long enough for it to become an issue." The implication was clear. Rebecca had stayed longer, had become more integrated into their lives than the occasional babysitter or teacher. "I should go," she said quietly. "Tomorrow, before this gets any more complicated." Michael didn't immediately agree, which surprised her. Instead, he asked, "Where will you go?" It was the question Rebecca had been avoiding since the night she'd fled the Four Seasons. Where would she go back to New York? To confront William and salvage what remained of her company? To a competitor? Leveraging her expertise for a fresh start, away entirely, leaving behind the world of high finance and corporate maneuvering. "I don't know," she admitted. "Back to reality, I suppose." "And what's reality for you?" "Becca," Michael asked, his voice calm but persistent. "You've been here almost a week, and I still don't know who you really are." Rebecca tensed. Had he recognized her after all? Was this the moment when her sanctuary would dissolve? "I told you about the engagement," she said carefully. "You told me pieces," Michael corrected. "Enough to explain why you might be running, but not enough to explain who you're running from or what you're giving up." He turned to face her more directly. "I respect your privacy. I do. But Emma isn't the only one getting invested here. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable in a way that made Rebecca's chest ache. Michael wasn't just worried about his daughter. He was worried about himself, about the connection that had been building between them. "I'm not who you think I am," Rebecca said softly. "I think you're exactly who I think you are." Michael replied, "I think you're someone who's been playing a role for so long, you've forgotten there's a difference between the role and the person. I think you're kind and smart and surprisingly good at building blanket forts for someone who apparently never did it as a kid." A reluctant smile tugged at Rebecca's lips. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple at all," Michael acknowledged. "But it could be honest." He paused, then added quietly, "You feel familiar to me too. You know, from the moment you showed up on my porch, like someone I've been waiting to meet without realizing I was waiting." The words echoed her own from that first night, the strange connection she'd felt standing on his porch, shivering and lost. Rebecca looked at him, really looked, at the kind eyes, the strong hands that built things and fixed things and held his daughter with such tenderness. In another life, in another world. She might have allowed herself to explore this connection, to see where it led, but her world was waiting, the mess she'd left behind growing larger with each passing day. "I should go inside," she said, rising from the swing. "It's getting late." Michael didn't try to stop her, just nodded with a quiet resignation that suggested he'd expected this response. "Good night, Becca." As she stepped into the warmth of the house, Rebecca felt as though she were leaving something precious behind on that porch swing. Not just Michael, but a version of herself she was only beginning to discover. That night, as Rebecca lay on the pull-out couch staring at the ceiling, her thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of the doorbell, a sound she hadn't heard during her stay. She sat up, listening as Michael's footsteps crossed the upstairs hallway and descended the stairs. Voices murmured in the entryway, too low for her to make out the words. Then, clearly, "We're looking for Rebecca Morgan." Her blood turned to ice. They had found her. Rebecca rose silently, gathering her borrowed clothes, mind racing. She could slip out the back door, disappear again. She could, Becca. Michael's voice came from the doorway. He stood there, expression unreadable, with a man in a tailored suit beside him. "This gentleman says he's looking for someone named Rebecca Morgan. Says it's urgent." The man stepped forward, professional and polished in a way that felt jarring in Michael's modest living room. "Ms. Morgan, I'm James Pierce, head of security for Caldwell Global. Mr. Caldwell is very concerned about your welfare." Rebecca straightened, drawing on the poise that had served her through countless boardroom confrontations. "I'm sure he is," she said coolly, "though not for the reasons you're implying." Michael looked between them, confusion giving way to dawning comprehension. "Rebecca Morgan," he repeated, "as in CEO of Morgan Enterprises, the woman who disappeared from her engagement party last week. The headlines must have reached even here." Rebecca realized her disappearance would have been news, her face on business channels and social media. "Yes," she admitted, not looking at Michael. "That Rebecca Morgan," James cleared his throat. "Ms. Morgan, Mr. Caldwell simply wants to speak with you. There's been considerable concern about your well-being. The media speculation has been intense." "I'm sure it has," Rebecca said. "Tell William I'm fine, and I'll be in touch when I'm ready." "Ms. Morgan, I really must insist. You've confirmed I'm alive and well," Rebecca interrupted firmly. "That's all William needs to know for now." James hesitated, clearly unprepared for resistance. "There are matters requiring your attention. The board has called an emergency meeting. There are rumors of a hostile takeover." Of course there were. William wouldn't waste the opportunity her absence presented. He would be mobilizing, using the chaos to implement the very plan she'd fled to avoid. "How did you find me?" she asked. James had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Your watch, the vintage Cartier Mr. Caldwell gave you. It has a tracking component in the band." Rebecca glanced down at her wrist, at the watch she'd kept when she'd discarded everything else. The one thing she'd thought was genuinely from William's heart had been a tracking device all along. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. She unclasped it and held it out to James. "Give this back to William with my regards." The security chief took it reluctantly. "Ms. Morgan, please reconsider. There's a car waiting. We can have you back in New York by morning, with a full security detail and PR team ready to manage the situation." Rebecca glanced at Michael, who stood silently observing the exchange, his expression guarded. She couldn't read what he was thinking, whether he felt betrayed by her deception or simply confirmed in suspicions he might have already harbored. "I need time," she told James firmly. "Tell William and the board I'm safe. I'm taking personal leave, and I'll address the situation when I return. That's all for now." James knew a losing battle when he saw one. He handed her a business card. "When you're ready, Miss Morgan, day or night." With a nod to Michael and a last, assessing look at Rebecca, he departed. Silence descended, heavy and awkward. Rebecca could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of James's car pulling away. "So," Michael said finally. "Rebecca Morgan." She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you." "You told me your name was Becca," he said. "That wasn't entirely a lie." Rebecca looked up, surprised by the lack of accusation in his tone. "No, it wasn't. My grandmother called me Becca before I became Rebecca Morgan, CEO and power broker." Michael leaned against the doorframe, regarding her thoughtfully. "The fiancé, that would be William Caldwell III, the real estate magnate." "Yes, the one who's been on the news claiming you had a nervous breakdown from wedding stress?" Rebecca's jaw tightened. "Has he? How convenient for him." "The news has been running stories all week," Michael said. "Your face has been everywhere. Runaway CEO leaves billionaire at the altar." "It wasn't the altar," Rebecca corrected absently. "Just the engagement party." A hint of a smile crossed Michael's face. "A critical distinction, I'm sure." Rebecca sank onto the edge of the pull-out bed. "You knew, didn't you? You recognized me." Michael didn't immediately answer. He crossed the room and sat beside her, leaving enough space between them to respect her boundary but close enough to convey that he wasn't pulling away. "I saw an article the second day you were here," he admitted, "when you were helping Emma with her homework. Your picture was on my news feed." Rebecca stared at him, astonished. "You knew who I was, and you still let me stay. You let me get close to Emma." "I let a woman who needed a safe place have one," Michael corrected gently. "The fact that she happened to be a famous CEO didn't change that she was also someone running from something that scared her enough to flee without a plan." Rebecca shook her head, amazed and confused by his perspective. "Most people would have called the police, or at minimum asked for an explanation." "I'm not most people," Michael said simply, "and I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." The acceptance in his voice, the lack of judgment or demand, undid something in Rebecca's carefully maintained composure. To her horror, she felt tears welling in her eyes for the first time since this ordeal began. "Hey," Michael said softly, reaching out to touch her hand. "It's okay." "It's not," Rebecca managed, fighting to regain control. "Nothing about this is okay. I left my company vulnerable. I let William paint me as unstable. I've been hiding here, playing house, while everything I've built is at risk." "Is that all you've been doing?" Michael asked quietly. "Playing house." The question struck at the heart of what Rebecca had been avoiding, because it hadn't felt like playing. Not really. It had felt like discovering a part of herself long buried beneath ambition and expectation. "I have to go back," she said instead of answering directly. "I have to face this." Michael nodded slowly. "I understand, but Rebecca," he hesitated. "When you go back, just make sure you're going back for the right reasons. Not because it's expected, not because it's the responsible thing to do, but because it's what you actually want." The words settled over her like a challenge and a permission all at once. What did she actually want? Had anyone ever asked her that before? Had she ever asked herself, I don't know if I can afford that kind of thinking, she said honestly. I have employees who depend on me, investors who trusted me, a reputation I've spent my entire career building. And what about you? Michael pressed gently. What about what Rebecca, not CEO Morgan, not William's fiancé, actually needs? She had no answer for that, no framework for separating her identity from the roles she'd occupied for so long. I should leave in the morning, she said instead. Before Emma wakes up, it will be easier that way. Michael looked as though he wanted to argue, but ultimately nodded. If that's what you think is best, his acceptance should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like a disappointment, as if a part of her had hoped he would fight harder to keep her there. Thank you, Rebecca said formally, for everything, your kindness, your discretion. It meant more than I can express. Michael stood, creating distance between them that felt suddenly vast. Get some rest, Rebecca. Tomorrow will come soon enough. As he left the room, Rebecca felt as though something precious was slipping through her fingers. Not just the sanctuary she'd found in this house, but a glimpse of a life she might have lived if different choices had been made along the way. In the morning, she would return to being Rebecca Morgan, CEO of Morgan Enterprises, woman who had everything under control. But for tonight, for these last few hours, she allowed herself to be simply Becca, a woman who had knocked on a stranger's door and found something she hadn't known she was seeking. Rebecca woke before dawn, the house still and silent around her. She dressed quietly in the clothes she'd arrived in now, clean and mended thanks to Michael's surprisingly capable sewing skills, and packed the few belongings she'd accumulated during her stay. She wrote a note, erased it, rewrote it, and finally settled on simple gratitude, Michael. I can't thank you enough for the sanctuary you provided when I needed it most. Please tell Emma I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person. She is extraordinary, and so are you. The world needs more people like both of you. Rebecca, she placed it on the kitchen counter where he would find it with his morning coffee, then hesitated before adding a postscript, P.R.S. Please finish Emma's scholarship application. She deserves every opportunity, and Brookside Academy would be lucky to have her. With one last look around the small house that had sheltered her during the strangest week of her life, Rebecca slipped out the front door into the pre-dawn darkness. She had called a car service using Michael's landline, a cash transaction. No digital trail, and the sedan was already waiting at the curb. Engine idling quietly. She didn't look back as the car pulled away. She couldn't afford to. The driver took her to a small hotel in downtown Boston, where Rebecca checked in under her grandmother's maiden name, paying cash from the emergency fund Michael had insisted she take. In the anonymous comfort of a standard hotel room, she finally allowed herself to formulate a plan. First, she needed information. She purchased a prepaid phone from the hotel gift shop and called the one person she knew would give her the unvarnished truth, Alexandra, the attorney who had warned her about William's prenup clause. Rebecca. Alexandra's voice was shocked, relieved. My God, are you all right? Where are you? I'm safe, Rebecca assured her. But I need to know what's happening. The truth. Alex, not the media version. Alexandra exhaled audibly. It's been chaos. William initially played the concerned fiancé, suggesting you were overwhelmed, possibly having some kind of breakdown. The board called an emergency meeting 3 days after you disappeared. William was there, with his legal team. Let me guess, Rebecca said grimly. He suggested a temporary leadership structure with him at the helm. Exactly. He cited the merger discussions you'd been having, presented documents with your signature, Rebecca giving him proxy authority in your absence. Rebecca's blood ran cold. I never signed any such documents. I didn't think you had, Alexandra confirmed. But they look legitimate. The board was divided. Half believed William, half suspected something was off. They've given him temporary authority for 30 days, after which they'll reassess. It was worse than Rebecca had imagined. William hadn't just been planning to acquire her company through marriage. He'd been setting up a hostile takeover all along, complete with forged documents. What about the staff, Rebecca asked, thinking of the people who had worked alongside her for years, who had believed in her vision. Most are confused, Worried, some of the executives are already jumping ship, accepting offers from Caldwell Global subsidiaries. Alexandra hesitated. William is moving fast. Rebecca, he's already announced a restructuring that looks suspiciously like dismantling your core operations and absorbing them into his companies. Rebecca closed her eyes, absorbing the blow. Everything she had built over 15 years was being systematically taken apart in a matter of days. What do you need from me? Alexandra asked. I have resources, contacts. I can help you fight this. Rebecca considered her options. She could wage a public battle, return to New York guns blazing, challenge William's authority and expose his deception. It would be messy, protracted, possibly destructive to the very company she was trying to save. Or she could be strategic, methodical, use William's certainty of his own victory against him. I need documents, Rebecca decided. Everything you can get me on William's restructuring plans, the forged proxy documents, board meeting minutes, and I need a secure line to Janet Chen. Janet was Morgan Enterprises' largest individual investor outside of Rebecca herself, a shrewd businesswoman who had backed Rebecca from the beginning and had no love for William Caldwell III or his methods. I can do that, Alexandra confirmed. What's your plan? First, I gather intelligence. Then, I build a coalition. Finally, I take back what's mine. Rebecca's voice hardened with determination. William thinks I ran because I was weak. He's about to discover just how wrong he is. Over the next 3 days, Rebecca worked from her hotel room, methodically building her case and her strategy. She spoke with key investors, trusted board members, and longtime employees, carefully avoiding William's allies while assembling a network of support. The story she told was simple and compelling. She had discovered William's deception and needed time to formulate a response, choosing to step back temporarily rather than create a public spectacle. Most believed her, some didn't. But enough powerful players in the Morgan Enterprises ecosystem rallied to her side that Rebecca began to see a path forward. On the 4th day, as Rebecca was reviewing financial projections Janet had sent over, her new phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Emma's asking about you. She found your note and made me read it to her twice. She says princesses aren't supposed to leave without saying goodbye. Michael. Rebecca stared at the message, her carefully constructed focus fracturing. She hadn't allowed herself to think about Michael or Emma, had compartmentalized those feelings as thoroughly as she did everything else in her life. But the simple text brought it all rushing back: Emma's gap-toothed smile, Michael's quiet strength, the feeling of belonging she'd experienced in their modest home, before she could talk herself out of it. She texted back, I'm sorry. I thought it would be easier for her, for all of us. His response came quickly. It wasn't. Rebecca's fingers hovered over the keypad. What could she say that she missed them, that in the midst of fighting for her company? She found herself thinking about blanket forts and snow kings and pancake breakfasts. How is she? She finally typed. A safer question. Confused. Sad. She keeps drawing pictures of you with that crown. Keeps asking when you're coming back. Guilt twisted in Rebecca's stomach. She had never meant to hurt Emma, had told herself the child would forget her quickly. Move on with the resilience children were known for. And you, she asked before she could stop herself. How are you? There was a longer pause this time, the typing indicator appearing and disappearing several times before his response arrived. I miss the woman who showed up on my porch, the one who helped with homework and built snowmen and laughed at my terrible jokes. I'm not sure if that was Rebecca Morgan, CEO, or just Becca, but I miss her. The words struck Rebecca like a physical blow. Because the truth was, she missed that woman too, the version of herself who had emerged in the shelter of Michael's home, free from the expectations and obligations that had defined her for so long. I have to do this, she wrote back. I have to fight for what's mine. I know, came his reply. I just hope you don't lose yourself in the process. Again. The again lingered on the screen, a gentle but pointed observation that cut to the heart of Rebecca's dilemma. Had she lost herself somewhere along the way to becoming Rebecca Morgan? CEO had the woman who'd appeared on Michael's porch been more authentic than the polished executive she'd spent years becoming? Rebecca set the phone down without responding, turning back to the financial documents with renewed focus. She couldn't afford these distractions, not with so much at stake, but later that night, as she lay in the impersonal hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. Rebecca found herself reaching for the phone once more. "Is Emma's scholarship application finished?" She texted. "Almost," Michael replied. Despite the late hour, "We're struggling with the essay about her unique qualities and potential contributions." Without hesitation, Rebecca responded. "She sees magic in ordinary things. She turns flying lions into ice breathers because it's winter. She believes in possibilities that adults have forgotten exist. That's what Brookside needs, someone who will transform their rigid thinking with unexpected wonder." There was a long pause before Michael's reply. "You really saw her, didn't you? Not just looked, but saw." "I saw both of you," Rebecca admitted, a confession she wouldn't have made in daylight. "Thank you for letting me." She fell asleep with the phone beside her pillow, a tenuous connection to the life she glimpsed but couldn't claim. The next morning brought reality crashing back in the form of an email from Alexandra. William had called a press conference for that afternoon, where he would address the situation at Morgan Enterprises and unveil a new strategic direction. It was time for Rebecca to make her move. She booked a flight to New York, arranged for a car to meet her at LaGuardia, and methodically prepared for battle. She chose her armor carefully, a sharply tailored charcoal suit. Heels high enough to intimidate but practical enough to move in. The subtle jewelry that had become her signature in the business world, as she applied her makeup with practiced precision. Rebecca studied her reflection, searching for traces of the woman who had built snowmen and read bedtime stories. She was still there, somewhere behind the professional mask, but muted now, subsumed by necessity. The flight passed in a blur of preparation. By the time Rebecca's car pulled up to the gleaming tower that housed Morgan Enterprises, she was fully armored, mentally and emotionally, for what was to come. The lobby fell silent as she strode through it, employees and security guards alike staring in shock at the CEO, whose face had been splashed across newspapers and business channels for the past 10 days. Rebecca acknowledged them with nods but didn't slow her pace. Heading directly for the executive elevator, Williams' press conference was scheduled for the company's main conference room on the 40th floor, according to Alexandra's intelligence. He was already there with his team, preparing for a 2 p.m. start. It was 1:55. Rebecca's executive access card still worked a surprising oversight on Williams' part. The elevator whisked her upward, and with each floor, Rebecca felt herself solidifying into the role she had perfected over years: leader, strategist, fighter. The conference room doors were closed when she reached them, the space beyond filled with the murmur of journalists and photographers preparing for the announcement. Rebecca took one deep breath, centering herself, then pushed the doors open with a confident hand. The room fell instantly silent. William, standing at the podium preparing his notes, froze mid-motion, his expression shifting from shock to calculation in the span of a heartbeat. "Rebecca," he said, recovering quickly, moving toward her with outstretched arms as if to embrace a returning loved one. "Thank God you're safe. We've been so worried." Rebecca sidestepped his approach, maintaining professional distance. "Save the performance, William," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly electric room. "I think we've both had enough pretense." Camera shutters clicked frantically, journalists scrambling to capture the unexpected confrontation. William's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "You're clearly still distressed," he said for the benefit of their audience. "Why don't we talk privately? Get you settled before you announce your takeover of my company," Rebecca interrupted, addressing the room at large rather than just William. "Before you implement the restructuring plans you've been developing for months, before you use forged proxy documents to dismantle everything I've built." Murmurs spread through the gathered press. Williams' public relations team moved forward, clearly trying to damage control. But Rebecca wasn't finished. "I didn't have a breakdown," she stated clearly. "I discovered that my fiancé had inserted a hidden clause in our prenuptial agreement that would transfer control of Morgan Enterprises to Caldwell Global upon divorce. when confronted with evidence of this deception. I chose to step back temporarily to assess my options. She turned directly to William now, meeting his cold gaze with one equally steely. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly you would move to take advantage of my absence, or that you would stoop to forgery to accelerate your plans. William's mask of concern slipped, revealing the calculating businessman beneath.